So one of the things that they should have at least pointed out to you is this this blueprint that just tells you what you're responsible for. The blueprint also gives you like some rules like rounding and some things like that. And I'll answer that. I'll get to that in just a second. But it should have told you like these couple of things. These are the types of questions like in general that you're going to see on your test. So you're going to see, you need to do household conversions, metric conversions, and then in between metric and household. Meaning going from like, you should be able to go from grams to milligrams, milligrams to micrograms. You should be able to go from pounds to kilograms, milliliters to ounces, things like that. Inches to centimeters. I've seen that on some of the tests too. So you want to make sure you can do that. I have found that most Boyce students seem to be very well prepared for that aspect. And maybe it is the ATI that helps out with those things. So those are like the two, like where you're going to get like a chunk of 8 questions. You're going to get 2 questions on what are called intake output calculations. So at Allegheny campus, we do replacement volume calculation where they calculate like if the patient voids a certain amount and then we need to calculate the replacement volume, then that's how they do it. You guys do an intake, like an input, where you're supposed to calculate like based off of someone's menu, their meal, like they have coffee, juice, Jello, ice chips, whatever it is, and you're going to calculate how many ounce or how many milliliters they consumed in that meal. And I have an example of that, and those like again, that really just is more of this household to metric conversion, so it's not too bad. These are probably the ones that are most nursing students are already familiar with. They're these calculation of oral-based meds. This is the take 2 Tylenol, every 8 hours. But the added step is they're going to give you a strength, like 500 milligrams, twice a day. And then you need to know how many pills to basically administer based off of what the label says. And we'll go through an example of that too. Also, oral medications can include like liquid meds. So like an oral solution that you might have them consume and drink. Once you learn how to do those oral medications, then the next one that is basically, it's calculated the same way as an oral medication is what we call the parenteral medications, which is just the injectables. And I always tell students when you're first learning this stuff, injectables are liquid. So you're always going to inject milliliters unless it's insulin, and then you're going to inject units. And we'll cross that bridge too. Then there are what are called reconstitution medications. Basically, you're going to solve this the same way you solved an oral-based medication, but you have to look at the label to know what the strength is of the medication. So when they say reconstitution, it's not like you're doing anything. You don't need to walk through the steps. You just need to know how to find the information, and I'll show you how to do that. And then finally, insulin dosages really is just, can you read what's called a sliding scale? So if it tells you that you need to administer a certain amount of units of insulin given a certain, blood glucose range, can you look at that and then transfer that information to your answer? Or can you add together 2 insulin dosages, like 25 plus 25? Can you add those together and get 50? Sometimes I wonder why those are questions on for you guys, but obviously it's something you need to know how to do. So taking a step back, the whole test itself is 25 questions. It's you have, in order to pass the test, you have to get 23 out of 25. So you can't miss more than 2. If you do happen to miss more than 2, they're going to have you retake the test. So you have to remediate. Sometimes that's with me, sometimes that's with another tutor, and then take it again. And the severity of that is if you don't pass, they're not going to let you go to 120. They're not going to let you go on to the next thing. So you need to pass it. I'm sure they told you that, like why that's important. And then unfortunately, you have to do one of these tests every semester. So you can see the 130 and then the 220 and the 230, 240 different calculation requirements. But right now, we're just going to focus on what's happening in 110. Okay. So a couple other things. It should be the same at Boyce, but 25 questions. You have an hour to complete it, which is more than enough time. A lot of times students will rush through it and then unfortunately will maybe make a few errors that if they just gone back and double check their work, triple check, quadruple check, run it through your calculator again, they would have gotten right. So just take your time going through it. Don't rush it. What was the other thing I was going to say? The test, like I said, is an hour, and they give you a calculator. So you don't have to worry about bringing your own. And in fact, they won't let you use your own because most of us use our phones as our calculators and they're going to not let that slide. So, all right. Couple other things. When you answer your questions, you can't just put a number. You can't just say 2. You got to 2 what? 2 milligrams, 2 tablets, 2 units. You need to make sure you explicitly mark what your unit is, and it needs to be correct. Meaning, like, if the medication is available in capsules and you say, I'm going to give them 2 milliliters, then you answer that question wrong. It needs to be 2 capsules. Okay. I do know that some instructors will let the units part slide sometimes, but I don't know who those are and if that's consistent or not. So I would not do that. They're also going to check on and dock you if you are using leading or trailing zeros inappropriately, meaning that if you have like 1 milliliter or something that is less than 1 milliliter, you do want to use that leading zero. So you want to indicate that it's 0 point something. Don't just write 0.5 because sometimes that little point doesn't look like it's there and it looks like you wrote 5. That's the kind of the best way to do that. Also, if your answer is 0.5, that's your answer. Don't put 0.50 because the same thing applies. Then it kind of looks like, would they mean 50 or do they mean 0.5? What did they mean here? So just don't use trailing zeros. There's rules with milliliters, and these rules also somewhat apply to like when you convert like pounds to kilograms. If you have a number greater than 1, you want to take that number. So let's say it's 1.25 milliliters, and you're going to round it to the nearest tenth. So if it's a 5, you have to look at the hundredths place, round it up to 1.3. If it's 4 or fewer, then you leave it as 1.2. What you don't want to do is just automatically round your numbers to the nearest whole number. That, especially with the pounds to kilograms, you don't want to do that. So that's why I'm taking the time to tell you that. If you have a volume that's less than 1 milliliter, so 0 point something, then you want to round it to the nearest hundredth in that instance. So like here, the example, now I will say like, I don't think you're going to get something that's 0.969, but they want you to be as precise as possible because I think we can all agree that that's close enough to 1, that's probably what the answer is supposed to be. But for this example, if you do get 0.969, follow these rounding rules and follow these rounding rules and you would get 0.97. So you're looking for 2 significant digits when the number is less than 1. Sometimes your answer is just 0.5. So you just leave it at that. All right. Some of your questions, they're going to ask you to answer in military time. So you need to review what military time is. You can find plenty of YouTube videos explaining military time if that's something you're not familiar with. And in the event that we go over some of the questions that include military time, I kind of explain it. But basically, it's that time where it's 1,300 hours is equivalent to 1 p.m., that sort of thing. Is that I don't know what you know, and I can't assume that what you know, everyone else knows. All right. This last one is more just like when you're looking at a syringe, just making sure you're paying attention to the marks on the syringe. So like sometimes a syringe is every 2 milliliters, sometimes a syringe is every 1, sometimes the syringe can be down and go down into the tenths, hundredths, and even the thousands place. So you just want to pay attention to what's on the syringe. I've never, in all the years that I've been doing this, have ever seen this come up as any kind of issue, other than if you're supposed to pick a syringe to utilize, which I've never seen Boyce students have to go through and decide which syringe to use. It's usually just marking the syringe that they gave you. All right, so saying all that, there's a variety of questions, and then what I've done, typically I don't know if you've watched any of my previous videos that I put together for Boyce.
Yeah, I watched your first one.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I try to create like a breakdown. I can't remember, like sometimes if there's not good in attendance, then I just don't end up doing any reviews. So like I typically get good attendance with my Allegheny campus 110 reviews. So you're always welcome to look at those. We cover basically the same stuff. They don't do reconstitution, and they do a different intake output calculation, but you can still get the information out of it. Anyways, one of the things, and I put together, and I think this should show up. I just recopied, and I left this in the archive folder. I'm going to move it out, and I just did the some 110 practice problems that if you looked at them at all, these are all still the same problems. I didn't change anything on these. There's not a key for this. I never put one together, but I like to kind of use the time to kind of work through some of these problems. The other thing is when you're looking at this, Casey, is just like you might see something that's like, hey, I don't quite remember how to do that, or that looks foreign to me, or all looks pretty straightforward and easy to me. I think I can work through those. But the best thing you could do is just work through them. And if you're unsure of your answer, that's a great thing to email me about, or even ask on like a follow-up, review. In all honesty, if you ever get stuck, Google's AI, like when you type into Google these things, like 117 pounds equals kilograms, it tells you, it gives you a methodology, it breaks it down. So those things work out pretty well if you ever get stuck or looking for a key for something. Are any of these problems like here, like the unit conversions, is that something you'd like to see work through, or do you feel like you'd like to see something maybe with like more of like a medication label associated?
No, these are great. I would like to see 1 and 2,
Okay.
And 7 and 8.
Okay, perfect.
Well, maybe even 5.
Okay, that's okay. Yeah. So we'll start with 1, and then
Okay.
we'll progress on, because I'm gonna have to remind myself what you said.
Yeah,
So
because I understand the concept. I think just a little extra practice would help me a lot.
absolutely. All right. So the way this room, so I'm actually on campus at Allegheny campus. So the way this room is set up, like the projector cam is off to the side. So if you can't hear me, please let me know. But I should be still in volume range. So the first thing, and can you see my paper okay?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, good. So one of the things, let's see, turn up the volume here.
I turned my volume up too, so I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know where the microphone setup is in here, so I'm not even sure how it's reading it, but obviously we can hear each other, so it seems to be working okay. So the first thing you need to know is that 1 gram is equivalent to 1,000 milligrams. And I think once you know that, and like I said, you have to have those memorized. They're not going to give them to you. Okay. You need to know that 1 milligram is equal to 1,000 micrograms. And just in case, 1 kilogram is equal to 1,000 milligrams. I don't think you're going to have to worry about converting kilograms to milligrams. I just don't see that as like a skill that's necessary in nursing.
Yeah, I haven't seen it
Um,
yet in any of the tests.
Say that again?
I haven't seen the kilograms to milligrams on any of the tests
The
so
only
far.
thing I usually see that is going from pounds to kilograms.
Yeah, I've
And
seen that a
then,
couple times.
yeah. And then on the off chance, maybe going from kilograms to pounds, but again, usually we're moving towards the metric system because that's the system that you are converting to mostly in the sciences and in medicine. So this first one, there's a couple different ways you can do this. I've been doing this for a while, and you may have even learned this, that you could just move your decimal point over. And if you do that, that's fine. But if you find that, 90% of the time you get it right, and then 10% of the time you move the decimal over the wrong way, there is another strategy that just kind of helps to clarify, and that's using dimensional analysis. Now, a lot of times I'll mention that word and students cringe. You didn't run away, so that's great. And it's just a way to kind of organize it in case you ever are, in case you're ever getting the answer wrong every now and then. If you always get it right, then what you're doing is correct. Trust that process. You don't need to change anything. But what I do is just to show students, like if I'm going from milligrams to grams, and I know my conversion factor, that 1 gram, 1,000 milligrams, then I know that I'm dividing by 1,000 and my number should be getting smaller versus multiplying by 1,000 and my number getting bigger. And so that's one of the things that's like valuable to know. And that's how the whole decimal thing moving works. So like when I look at this, I do neither. I just write 1.375 and then I move on to the next problem.
So like for the
But-
first one, because we know that there's like 1,000 milligrams in 1 gram, do you just move it over 3 times the
Correct.
decimal point?
Yeah, so if you're doing move the decimal over, you'd move it 1, 2, 3 times.
Okay.
Yeah. But like I said, the trick is because sometimes, believe it or not, I'll have students that will get, 1,375,000 grams, and it's a really big, ridiculous number, and that's what we don't want.
Right.
Now, you'll notice that I left my answer as 1.375. I didn't round that to 1.4. So when you do basic metric to metric conversions, do not round.
Okay.
Okay. So just make sure, because that's another thing that they'll dock you on if you round that number. Again, it's only metric to metric conversions that you typically are going to be focusing on with that. So following what you said about the moving the decimal, which way would you move the decimal for number 2?
So you're going from a bigger number, we're going from a smaller number to a bigger number, so you would go to the right.
Okay. So let's look at, so what would your answer be?
0.225?
Okay. Yeah. So with what you like, the way you said move the decimal to the right, I assumed you meant to make the number bigger to like 225,000. That's how I interpreted what you said. But then what you told me answer wise,
Yeah,
I would say
right.
move the decimal to the left. But you did that right. So you would have 0, don't forget that 0, 225 milligrams. And then the other thing that sometimes is kind of like a word trap, the number is not bigger, it's the unit that's bigger, right? So the milligrams is a bigger unit than micrograms.
Right.
And then grams is a bigger unit than milligrams versus number, because the bigger number actually goes with the smaller unit. And I'm trying not to get like, too into the weeds with that, just as a reminder. And then and then the other thing is I would just set that up the same way. I would take the 225 micrograms and then I would convert micrograms to milligrams. And there's 1,000 micrograms in a milligram. And that would just, again, just as a reminder, that you're dividing the number and it's getting smaller.
Okay.
You do that a couple of times and it'll kind of, come in hand. But if you're ever stuck and you want to double check, sometimes it's nice to have more than one way to answer the problem. So if you have two ways to answer the problem and they're both getting you to the right answer, then you have a certain amount of confidence that you got the right answer.
Yeah, I would definitely do both of them. I feel like I like the conversion factor better than just moving the decimal point.
Yeah, because like sometimes, like especially if they throw in like and I don't think they would, but if they threw in like another variable, then that might make things a little bit more challenging. Like if they like made like decigrams or something like that, then you wouldn't always move it 3. But like I said, you're not gonna have to worry about that. So all right, so you said 1, 2, you said 5?
5.
Okay. So again, I just like to show the dimensional analysis aspect of things because a lot of these just have conversions. Now, what we need to know is how many pints are in a milliliter, how many milliliters are in a pint. And if we go up here, we have to, again, memorize that a pint is 2 cups. And then I also added that 2 cups is 480 milliliters. So the other thing you can do is you can just say, well, 2 pints is 2 cups. 1 cup is 240 milliliters. You could chop that up any way you want. But if you kind of memorize these, and also like if you cook or if you use measuring cups at home or anything like that, if you look at the equivalents of a pint, a cup, and a quart, you'll see it on there and it'll say like 480 milliliters and things like that. There are some textbooks that use different numbers, and I do not think those are correct. So just be careful with those. Make sure you use correct numbers. So like if they tell you that a pint is 500 milliliters, it is not. A quart is 1,000 milliliters, it is not. I don't think you need to worry about that too much, but just in case you see that. So, those of you coming in for 110 Allegheny, just give me a few minutes. I'm working with Boyce students right now. Okay. So the way I would set this up is I would take that 1.5 pints and then I would look at my conversion. I want to get rid of pints and I want to convert it to milliliters. And then 1 pint is 480 milliliters. Now, again, it's helpful if you memorize that or know that. Alternatively, you can convert pints to cups and then to milliliters, but sometimes that's crazy. So, okay.
Yeah, I got that answer.
You said you got an answer?
Yes, 720.
720. I think that's right. All right, and then you said 7 and 8 as well?
Yeah, even if you just do one, let's do the last one because now that I know that the cup is up there, yeah.
Yeah, and then on the website or the OneDrive share folder and the archive folder, I have a lot of these kind of already saved, like where you can see the different conversions that you're responsible for. And if you're not finding them, just let me know and I will make sure you have them.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so this is 2.25 quarts. And we're going to convert quarts to milliliters. And so all I'm going to do is like, so I have this written out. 1 quart is 2 pints, which is 4 cups, which is 32 ounces. And so, and I also have the 960 ml written out there. One of the things that I find helpful is writing out your conversions and making sure they're all listed on, like on your paper. Just like when you sit down to practice this stuff, write those out. That way it's something you're memorizing and learning.
Makes sense.
So 1 quart is 960 milliliters. And so you're going to get some giant number.
2,160.
2,160.
And that's milligrams. Or I mean milliliters.
Milliliters, yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you for your time today.
No, you're welcome, Casey. And like I said, I plan to do this every Thursday. maybe more students will show up. If I need to do alternative times, I was just trying to figure out the schedule based off of what your instructor told me you guys had some availability outside of the nursing, so.
Yeah, Thursdays work great for me. I get done with clinicals at 2:30, so.
Okay. All right, well, yeah, then we'll meet up next week then if you're available. And
Yes, I'll
yeah,
be
it's nice
there.
meeting you. Thanks for joining.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.